All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the C Show with George again. Uh, yes, how are you, George?
I'm doing well. I'm great. Um, yeah, I think we're going to talk about Margaret, otherwise known
Yeah,
as
I would love
Margot
to know
Burns tonight.
about Margaret.
Sorry?
I would love to know about Margaret.
Yeah. The line's not that clear, so we're going to have to shout.
Okay,
Maybe
I'll speak loud. I can hear you good. I'll speak clearly though.
I'm going to turn my volume up a bit. Maybe that will help. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we are dying to learn about Margaret.
Yeah. So this is a long story.
What was the biographical like? Where's Margaret from? Family.
She's from um, um, California, but actually Galt, California. If you see, I'll just highlighted that. That's where she grew up.
What part? Gulf.
Galt, Galt, California. I don't know if I've even ever looked up where that is. But what happened is, I want to tell you a little bit more about how I came into contact with Margaret before we talk about her story.
Wait, but can I get like her biographical information, like where she went to school, home life? I mean,
Yeah,
we need to know that so we can develop the character.
Yeah, we'll get on to that in a minute. If we start at the top of the page, this isn't quite true, actually. It says Margaret contacted me in August 2019. And that was actually when I started realizing what she knew. Because she had been sending me messages before that, but I've been sort of almost ignoring them. She was telling me things that she'd been told, but she didn't really
text messages or
text. Yeah, Facebook chat messages.
Okay.
I've now, we always talk. We don't ever talk by Facebook, like, we never talk face to face. It's always messages. I've seen her timeline and things, and there are videos on there and things, but we always talk by Facebook Messenger, and I'll explain why later. It's to do with a medical condition she's got.
Does she have a Facebook account?
Sorry?
Does she have a Facebook account?
Yes, she does. Yes, she does. She very much does. Her Facebook account is Margaret Main Burns. And
does she accept friends requests?
She would usually ignore. Oh, she wouldn't accept a friend request. No, she's very careful about her personal security. Okay. So that's why on this page I've got things like names changed, and her Facebook account was secret when I first made this page, and then people started figuring it out. So it's not really a big secret any longer.
How did she find you?
She found me because I was running the Scott Peterson group.
Oh, she just came across it?
Yeah, okay. And she was watching me for a long time before she started contacting me, and she was telling me things about the case, and also about the Teresa Halbach murder case as well. And I wasn't really paying proper attention because she was telling me these things like somebody had told her something, and I just thought that was a sort of opinion, or someone had guessed it, or I don't quite know what I thought. But in August 2019, I suddenly sort of woke up and I asked her the question, "Who told you this?" Okay.
Yeah.
And then she explained that she'd been told all these things by Edward Wayne Edwards, the serial killer. And I was just I was like blown away.
Um, just curious. So, because there's a million of these crime story Facebook stuff. Why did she pick you of all people to tell this to?
Well, I was admin of the Scott Peterson group.
Yeah, but there's plenty of those out there. I mean, she never told
Well, she figured out that I suppose that I might understand what she was saying to me. She was very cautious.
Kind of like an intuition.
She was feeling me out for 2 years or more. Like,
she told you this about Wayne Edwards.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I'm not the first person she contacted. The first person she contacted was John Cameron, and that was in 2015. So a few years earlier, really.
Did she tell him that stuff?
Yeah, she started explaining to him who she was, how Edwards had told her all these things. So that was, in fact, what happened actually. I'm going to scroll down the page a bit because this is a big part of the story. And you can see me scrolling down, can you? I just want to get the right bit up. You can see this is a long page with a lot of information. Oh God, I still can't even find it on my own page. If I look for Cameron. Right, so what happened in 2015? Yeah. What happened with Edwards is that John Cameron figured out a lot about him. John Cameron is an ex-cold case detective, okay? Yeah. And he did a great investigation into Edward Wayne Edwards. And Margaret became aware of that. And she contacted John Cameron. And she contacted him not because of Edward Wayne Edwards at all, really. But she contacted him because she had this memory that Edward S. Montgomery had told her that Burton Abbott was innocent, which might seem an obscure connection, but you'll see eventually how it all kind of fits together. Okay. So she contacted John Cameron back in 2015, and then later, slowly, she was sending me these messages, and in August 2019, I suddenly understood what she was saying, that she'd had this incredible experience with Edwards. And when she the thing to understand, when she contacted John Cameron, she didn't even remember who Edwards was. But then she started to recover memories because John Cameron was saying, "Do you remember this man, Edward Wayne Edwards?" And she said, "No."
George, let me stop right there and ask you a question. You said when she was sending these messages, then you realized, was she sending you these messages like they were crypto messages or
just messages on Facebook Messenger?
But there wasn't anything crypto about it. It was just regular, just like me and you talking.
Yeah, just chat messages. But I wasn't really paying that much attention. I was thinking she's got some opinions or someone had told her these opinions. I don't know what I was thinking.
One other question before you continue. You said that she didn't even remember this until James Cameron told her?
Till John Cameron? Well, John Cameron, she contacted John Cameron.
Right, but she didn't remember anything about Edwards until John Cameron
spoke to her. Yeah.
And then she started remembering about Edwards.
That's right. She contacted him about Burton Abbott because she'd seen some publicity about John Cameron's book. Okay. And then she suddenly started remembering this man she'd met in 1971. It's like, but what's so amazing is that it's like it opened a huge book of things that came back. So you didn't remember
anything about him for 34 years or 44 years?
It was 1970, so it was 45 years, really.
45 years. So she didn't remember anything about it for 45 years?
That's right. I mean, she did have memories of being of an experience she had with a group of criminals.
Okay.
So she knew she she was kind of terrorized by this group of criminals back in 1971, and Edwards was just one of them. It was a whole group of them.
How many would you think?
Sorry?
How many would you guess was in this group?
I've never really discussed that, but she's mentioned at least 5 or 6. I mean, the most famous one of them is John Gotti.
So, wait a second. John Gotti, the head of the crime family, was running around with Edwards and 3 other guys.
More than that. They were all there. I mean, numerous members of the Gambino crime family and other people, like Alvin Ray Karpis.
Yeah.
And his son.
So, but I'm not being argumentative. I'm just trying to keep up here with you. All right. So she was running around with more than 5 or 6, right?
Yeah. I mean, by running around, okay, we're getting into her story now. Okay. So what happened is she was living in this tiny little garage apartment in Sacramento. Okay. We can go a little bit more into how that came about, but it's not so important. And then one day she got drugged. Okay. This is what happened in around the 1st of January 1971. She got drugged. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant. She was taken off to a whorehouse.
Yeah.
And the plot at that stage was she was going to be kept there until she gave birth, and then her baby would have been taken away from her and sold to an attorney in San Francisco. That's what she was told.
And who made her go there again?
Yeah, they drugged her. They took her away in a car to some place she doesn't know where, because she was, drugged, and I don't know if she was blindfolded. I never asked her about that, but she wasn't conscious. She doesn't know where she was taken.
Okay.
And that was the start of her experience in 1971. Okay, she does know it was a 3-story Victorian house, but she can't find it where it was. She can remember, she can remember what the house looked like, but she can't find it anywhere. Okay, so that's one thing she remembers, and that was the start of her experience, and it kept on for several months. And she was being terrorized by this group of criminals, and she realized that she couldn't do anything about it, because there were too many of them, and they were also her sister was living in the house with children of something. So she realized there's no way she could go to police safely.
Let me catch you up here. Now, this is after she had the baby, or this is while she?
This is before she had the baby. She was still pregnant. She didn't have the baby until April.
And where did they put her at? You said they put her in where at?
Sorry?
You said they took her somewhere and left her. Where did they leave her at again?
Well, they took her to this 3-story Victorian house.
Okay.
But what happened there is the madam who was running it decided, because her brother was in the California Highway Patrol, she decided it was probably too risky, the scheme to keep her there until she gave birth and to sell the baby on. So what happened is the madam told John Gotti that she was a good girl and she was a keeper, and she should take him back. And then what happened after that is Margaret became what she calls a cover girl. She was kind of.
What was this house? Where was this house at again, though?
Sorry?
Where was the house located?
We don't know.
But the madam who ran the house knew John Gotti well enough to call him and get him to take her back.
Yeah.
While she's still pregnant.
Yeah. So that was how it all got started. Okay, and this gang of criminals Gambino.
First it got started. First it got started. She running around with them. They got pregnant and they dropped her off the home. And then Johnny came back and got her. So that would be the sequence of events so far, right?
That's right. Actually, I don't know. I don't know how long she was at the Victorian house. That's something I should ask her. Actually, I don't know if it was a matter of like 10 minutes.
Did you get her on a live camera with us?
Sorry?
Did you get her on live camera with us?
You need to speak slowly.
I said, we could turn the video off. Could you get her on audio with us so she could talk?
No, she wouldn't talk on a video. I'll explain why later.
Well, we wouldn't have to video her. She could just talk with audio. And
no, she wouldn't talk with audio either.
Even with her voice muffled, I got a thing here that can muffle out your voice, so they wouldn't even tell her.
There's no way on earth that she would do that.
Even without her voice being known.
No, there's no way she's going to do that. She's very, very careful with her security, and she won't. There's other reasons. We'll get on to that later. Right. So that's what the start of the story, and then.
Well, let me say one thing though. Let me say one thing, and I'll shut up, and I promise I'll let you talk then. Well, if she's that trouble with her security, I mean, that's a lot to be telling James Cameron and you all this information, and she doesn't really know y'all that well, isn't it?
She was cautious. I mean, she won't tell. She's keeping like where she's living completely secret, and she's also keeping some names secret. But yeah, she's really scared still because we are talking about organized crime here. And, there are still an awful lot of people, in current cases, nobody knows quite, if the Gambinos are still carrying on. Just a year ago or a year or two ago, the head of the Gambinos was assassinated.
The crime families, they're not as powerful as they were, say, back in the 90s. But
yeah, I'm always telling her, I don't think these are events that were a very long time ago, and I don't think
John Gotti's also been dead a long time, and
John Gotti's been dead a long time. Everyone's been dead a long time, and I don't think the Gambinos are killing people like they were back in the 1970s and 80s and things, So organized crime has definitely evolved. It's more
she didn't implicate anybody in a crime now, so why would she be so scared of?
There are still criminals out there who are involved in these cases.
Okay.
I mean, for instance, I don't want to go. Yeah, it would take a lot of explaining to do there.
I'm sorry, I've interrupted you enough. Go ahead, keep telling me the story.
She's got plenty to be worried about. I mean, some of these cases are high profile as well. Not everyone's going to be happy, especially certain police officers and some criminals. So yeah, she's got every reason to be concerned about her security and keeping. And she's also got a medical condition that makes it worse. Okay, so what happened is there was a crucial meeting where she met Edward S. Montgomery. And that was, and she was fully conscious when that happened. She was taken to a hotel room.
Tell us who Edward Montgomery is for somebody who don't know. For some of us who don't know.
Sorry.
For some of the viewers who don't know, tell who Edward S. Montgomery is.
Oh right. Well, yeah, we can click on that. I can click on that link. He was basically a journalist. Okay. There's a long story there which is important, but one of the things he did is he found the body of Stephanie Bryan in May 1955, and it was actually Edward Wayne Edwards who led him to that body.
Really?
He was posing as automobile salesman Leroy Myers, and
okay.
Burton Abbott was, you can see what it says on the screen. Burton Abbott was later sentenced to death for her murder and executed. So this was one of Edwards's early murders where he planted a body. He used Edward S. Montgomery to find the body
I want to save a lot of the Edward stuff, murders for later, because I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, but Edward S. Montgomery is an important part of this story. It gets quite political at this point because one of the things we know about is that he wrote a full story about the case of Robert Meisenbach in 1960, and this was all very political. It was about the House of Un-American Activities. So, and it was a full story that he wrote for the FBI. In other words, for J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about J. Edgar Hoover, and
I know a little bit about it.
On in those days, it was all about the Red Scare, and this was a false case that was brought against Robert Meisenbach. He was acquitted, but Edward S. Montgomery, we know, wrote a false article about this place. So I'm going to skip a bit over that because people can research that, and it is part of the backstory. It is an important part of the backstory here. But just to summarise, is that what happened is that she was taken to meet Edward S. Montgomery sometime in January, February. She doesn't remember the exact date. Okay, and then it gets even more interesting. Okay. So what happened is that in March, she remembers that Edward Wayne Edwards sent what's called the Zodiac Pines card. So I don't know how much you know about the Zodiac killer, but the Zodiac killer is an extremely infamous serial killer who's never been identified.
I've started reading a little bit about him. So she just remembered this in March after the Zodiac killer hadn't killed since 1976.
The Zodiac killer started killing around 1968. Hold on, let me just check a little bit about the Zodiac.
Yeah, because I just now started reading about it, so I may call out the wrong dates. Forgive me if I do.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to just refresh my memory before I say something wrong about the Zodiac killer. Because I don't carry always. I'm going to get the Wikipedia page up about that just to get some very basic facts. Yeah, it was a set of there were
5 killings and 9 he was accused of, I believe.
Yeah, there was 4 separate attacks. The first 3 were couples. Oops. The first 3 were couples, and the 4th one was Paul E. Stein, who was a taxi driver. And these are the murders which we are absolutely sure the Zodiac killer was responsible for. I think
he was accused of 9 to 14 others, right?
Yeah, there were actually survivors, so he actually killed 5 people. There were 7 victims. Two of them survived. So. This is the Zodiac killer. I don't want to go into detail about what happened to the Zodiac killings because it's.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. But his crime spree supposedly ended. Is it 76? His last murder?
The murders were earlier than that.
Tell me what the last year was.
The first attack was 1968, December the 20th, 1968. So just before Christmas, 1968.
68 through what year?
1968.
Okay, and the last year was?
And the Stein murder was October 1969.
What was the last year he supposedly killed?
Sorry?
Well, on the Wikipedia, what was the last year that he supposedly killed?
October 1969. October the 11th, 1969 was the taxi driver.
So just 2 years was it?
Well, it's actually just under a year, isn't it?
Okay.
December 1968 to October 1969. But that sort of wasn't the end of the Zodiac killer because he was sending letters.
I know. I've heard about that, cryptic letters.
The actual murders, happened over a course of a little under a year.
Okay.
5 people killed. 1, 2, 3, four attacks, 5 people killed and 2 survivors. I mean, there's a huge amount known about the Zodiac killer. There's a massive amount of facts. But coming back to Margaret, which is an important thing, is that, okay, you just need to know the Zodiac killer was sending crazy letters and cards to the press. So he wasn't just killing people, he was terrorizing people with these anonymous letters. So all these anonymous letters and cards came coming in. And what happened with Margaret is that in March 1971, she was actually forced to make one of these cards. It's called the Zodiac Pines card. I'm just going to scroll down to show you what it looked like. Okay, this was the Zodiac Pines card. It's got Sierra Club, Fort Sought Victim 12 on it. It's got Around in the Snow upside down. Can you see on the left there? It's got Peek Through the Pines. These are all bits of newspaper stuck onto it.
And she was forced to write that?
And she was forced to make it. I mean, yeah, it was made from newspaper.
All these, just so to make sure, all the Zodiac killings took place somewhere in California, right?
Yeah, they were all pretty much San Francisco area.
Right. One question I have though: how did she end up with Edwards when John Gotti had her in New Jersey as one of his girls, or New York, wherever his crime family was at?
Well, John Gotti wasn't known to be there, but that's another big sub story. I'm not going to go into how John Gotti was there, but he was.
No, I'm asking how John Gotti got how he got her with Edwards.
I mean, John Gotti was the leader of this gang of criminals, obviously.
I understand.
And Edwards was one of them. Edwards was a hitman for him. Okay.
He was a hitman for John Gotti.
Yes. Yeah.
So John Gotti gave Margaret to Edwards out in California.
Yeah, I mean, this whole gang of criminals, including Edwards, were visiting Margaret in this garage apartment. Okay. And one day, Edwards came into came to the garage apartment and made Margaret prepare the Zodiac Pines card. Okay. This is one of the many experiences she had with. I mean, they were coming to see her, like almost every day? She wasn't like physically held captive, but they were watching her. They even put a bug in her apartment, so they were listening to what was going on.
The only thing I'm confused about is if she was staying at this house while she was pregnant and Gotti came and got her, why was she being locked away under surveillance with Gotti?
You're really faint, I'm afraid. I still can't hear you properly.
I said, if she was at this house waiting to give birth and John Gotti came and picked her up, why was she being locked away under surveillance if she was up under Gotti's protection?
Well, she was under his protection in some sense. I mean, what she was is what's known as a cover girl. He wanted everyone to think that she was his girlfriend. I mean, she sort of was. She wasn't a willing girlfriend. You see what I mean?
But he kept his girlfriends locked away like that?
No, he was taking her out on visits. So, like, they would go when they went out. When John Gotti went somewhere, Margaret would be along with him to make it look like he had a girlfriend.
And Edwards had access to where she was staying at, John Gotti's girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, she was kept under complete observation in her garage apartment where she was living.
Edwards was just allowed to go in there and see her at will.
Yeah, so Edwards came in one day and made her prepare this Zodiac Pines card. This is just one of the things that happened. And it's important because we know the Zodiac Pines card exists. And he explained what it meant to her as well. I mean, like, I won't go into complete details, but he pointed out. So you see where I've got the cursor. That is a little wagon in the middle in the Pines card that you'd never notice if you didn't know it was there. I've circled it in red here. And to Edwards, this was all to do with his name. And he explained the card to her. I'm not even going to try and explain it to you here, but it was all to do with Charles Wayne, which is basically the pole star and the Big Dipper, and everything was going around and around. So it's a clue. And Charles Wayne are two of his names that he was born with. He wasn't born Edward Wayne Edwards. He was born Charles. Wayne was his name later, but his original name was Charles. So Charles Wayne was two of his names that are in the card. And he explained other things about the card. And then the other thing is that Margaret also remembers writing the envelope. Okay, and she remembers, you see that where it says "Attention, Paul Averley Chronicle." She didn't know how to spell chronicle. She thought it had a K in it. You can see just there that it's like somebody started to spell it with a K, and then it's been changed to an L. Well, she remembers making that mistake, and she remembers Edwards telling it to spell Paul Avery's name with an L in it. You see, Paul Averley. So she remembers all these details, and he was explaining to her. She
remembers all these details 45 years later?
More than 45. It's 45 years later, yes.
45 years later, she remembers all of these details like that.
She does, but the reason she didn't remember them until 2015. What Edwards had done, she was drugged while this was going on, and she was hypnotized.
For 45 years?
She wasn't hypnotized for 45 years. She was hypnotized for however long it takes to make the Zodiac Pines card, maybe half an hour.
How did he hypnotize her?
Well, I mean, she has memories of just, like when you go under general anesthetic, that he would be leaning over her with a sort of grin and she would just be gone. I mean, I don't know I don't know how much you know about hypnotism, but I think they were using drugs on her as well, so it wasn't. But anyway, I think she was quite easily hypnotized.
He leaned over and grinned and hypnotized her.
Yeah, so what he must have done is hypnotize her. And I don't know how much you know about hypnosis, but when you hypnotize someone, you can tell them at the end, don't remember anything that's happened during hypnosis. And you can also make a cue. You can say, don't remember anything until I snap my fingers. And then when the fingers are snapped, suddenly they start remembering.
So, but I'm sure she heard fingers snap throughout the years, and she never remembered them.
Yeah, we don't know what the cue was, but the cue may have been something like, I don't know. We don't know what the cue was, but it could have been anything. But it's something must have cued it after.
So we don't know how.
Maybe the cue was until you hear that Edward Wayne Edwards has died, or until you hear the name Edward Wayne Edwards. Maybe I don't know what the cue was.
So we don't know how she was hypnotized, and we don't know what the cue was. All right, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we know roughly how she was hypnotized. I mean, you
tell me she was leaning over smiling, and then you said that she used drugs. So we really don't know how.
It was some combination, but I mean, she doesn't really remember that very well.
We do not know how. When we don't know the
what she does remember is when she was hypnotized or whatever happened to her or drugged, Edwards must have been. She has all these memories, but they were sort of blocked. Do you understand the idea that it's not that the memories weren't there? It's just that there was no reason for her to remember them.
Well, I also know that
you don't start remembering.
You can also put in memories that don't exist when somebody is up under hypnosis.
That's true. That's very true. What she knows is she's got these memories. Okay. And I mean, it's important that it's not. That's why it's important that she knows so much, and what she knows matches reality. Do you see what I mean? Okay. So she can see this card now. And recognize her own writing, and so she knows it was her. but also she knows things about the cards, which Edwards explained to her, what the card meant, how it's got his name in it. So it's all self-validating. If it was just memories, you know, you could say, well, you maybe dreamt all this, but she hasn't dreamt it all because there's all sorts of details that she remembers.
Well, the $1,000 question I've got is why?
And then they turn out to be true.
Why did he not just do it himself? Why did he go to the trouble to hypnotize her and have her write it?
We don't really know. I mean, what she was told is that she was going to be a time capsule. John Gotti told her this. If I do, there we are. Oh no, sorry, Edwards. Sorry, Edwards told Margot she was going to be a time capsule. And he started telling her his whole life story as well. He told her, for instance, how he'd shot his mother when he was 10 years old because she had gangrene. And this is like an important part of his story. He also told her he got his name off a gravestone, which is another incredible detail, which turns out to be true as well. Because he changed his name from Charles Edward something, Myers, I think, was his mother's name. We don't know whose father was. He changed that to Edward Wayne Edwards, and that was actually his brother's name, his adoptive brother. It was his aunt had a child who died called Edward Wayne Edwards, and Edwards changed his identity and changed his birth date. There's these incredible circumstances that Margaret knows about that nobody else never knew about. So, I mean, it's self-validating on various levels. First of all, we know that Margaret's telling the truth because she knows so much about Edwards that nobody else ever knew.
Well, ask me this though: why was Edwards telling her all of this?
Why was
Edwards telling her all of this?
We don't know. I mean, she was going to be this strange time capsule. I've got some theories on that. Like
all the girls out there, he just picked her.
I've got some theories on that. Like maybe if anyone ever tried to snitch to the police, say, then Margaret could be sort of revealed, and they would all go to prison forever, kind of thing. Like a sort of a, you know, like a deadly explosion, you know, a secret cache. They all
ended up did go into prison. John Gotti died in prison. Edwards died in prison.
Yeah, they never told. They never told. I mean, we don't know why they never told, but that's one theory I've got about what the idea was. But I think the main reason is that, you know, John Gotti, what Margaret says about it is that he had a heart. Do you know what I mean? Edwards.
Now, this is the same man who would kill somebody, go home, and eat a bowl of cereal and not think twice about it. John Gotti had a heart.
Can you just let me tell you about this? Edwards was a total psychopath. Okay, he liked killing people. He just became an absolute monster. John Gotti was not a monster like Edwards was. I mean, he was the head of a crime family, and he organised the murder of he organised the murder of the boss when he came to power, and he undoubtedly was involved in other murders as a result of involved in all crime.
But carrying out the murder and ordering a murder, you're still a murderer.
Oh, you're still a murderer. I mean, there's no doubt John Gotti was guilty of murder, of organising.
Just so we're clear on that.
He was the head of a crown family, but he wasn't a psychopath like Edwards. He didn't enjoy killing people, and I think he was. I'm not even sure how to explain this, but he felt extremely protective towards Margaret. He saved her life. At one point, Edwards started strangling her, and you know he was going to kill her, and John Gotti stopped it. He didn't want Margaret killed.
Okay, so John Gotti and Margaret and Edwards was in the same room, and he started.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say John Gotti. I don't know if he was in love with her. He felt extremely protective. He wasn't the monster that Edwards was. He didn't want Margaret killed. I mean, if Margaret had known too much, or John Gotti had thought the hypnosis didn't work, then she would have had to have been killed.
Right.
But he was testing her. He was testing her to see if the hypnosis had worked.
All right, hold on, George. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Me for a moment.
No, but all I'm doing is I want to make sure we're on the same page so I can follow your story. Okay. All right. So what you're telling me is that John Gotti, head of the crime family, and he was in the same room with Edwards, the serial killer, and Margaret, and Edwards started choking Margaret, and Gotti intervened. Right.
What happened is he was strangling her with a rope. She's described it in a lot of detail, and John wasn't in the room at that point, but he obviously heard what was going on. And
the crime family, a serial killer.
Can you just let me finish? Let me finish.
Well, I'm just making sure, George, I'm on the same page here, okay? I just want to make sure.
You're interrupting me when I'm trying to tell the story.
I'll let you. I'm just a member of the crime family. Margaret and Edwards was together, and he was choking her, and Gotti stopped it. Okay, go ahead.
He wasn't choking her; he was strangling her with a rope.
Well, 6 one way, half a dozen another.
Yeah, and before she was dead, John Gotti came in and rushed in and stopped it. Okay. So basically, they were fighting over her. He also had a fight with another Gambino who was sort of too interested in Margaret.
Edwards or John?
John Gotti. And she remembered this fight. It was by the American River in Sacramento. And it was a chain fight where they were fighting with chains. And there are all these sorts of details. She wasn't hypnotized and drugged when all that was going on. Okay. So she always had those memories of the Gambinos and this fight in which John Gotti, he didn't kill the other guy, but the other guy was told to drive into the river afterwards, and he did. There's some complex stories in there that she knows about the Gambinos. You know, she was with them for months, basically.
He drove a car into the river after the fight because
what happened is, I told you about Ray, Alvin Ray Carpis. Well, his son was there, and this guy who Gotti had the chain fight with, who was called, oh God, I've forgotten his name now. Mike. He was called Mikey, not his real name. He was told by Carpis Jr. To drive into the river, and he did. And so that.
What reason though?
That was the end of him. And they were sorry about that because he was a member of the gang, but he'd kind of.
Why did they tell him to drive in the river?
Sorry?
Why did they tell him to drive in the river?
He had an argument with Carpis Jr. I'd have to look up more about the details. Basically, yeah,
they told him to drive in the river, and he just did it because they had an argument.
Because if he didn't, his family would have been killed.
Well, first of all, and one question that I'll just keep going. Why didn't Gotti just shoot him instead of having a chain fight? Because he had a weapon.
It was like to show who's the tough guy, basically.
Okay,
he was fighting his. Okay. Yeah. I mean, at one point, John Gotti called him by his real name, and normally you only do that if you're about to, the band's about to be killed. So, okay. You don't use real names.
Gotcha.
In this situation, so they all had, Margaret didn't know any of their real names, although John used John, but which was probably a slight mistake. But
did she?
John's a pretty common name.
Edwards, that name?
Sorry?
Edwards' name?
Edward's name was never used, except.
Okay.
Well, he sort of told her two of his names when she was hypnotized, but no, not normally. He was introduced as something to do with diamonds. The Jack of Diamonds. They all had their own names. Like Alvin Karpus' name was Ray, and Alvin Karpus Jr. was Al, and John was John, and I can't remember all the names. She was Baby. She wasn't Margaret. She wasn't Margaret or Margot. Her. She would always just be called Baby.
Edwards was a member of the mafia, though.
Edwards, I don't think he was ever what do they call it? A made man.
No. He was definitely not a made man.
Because he couldn't have been, because he didn't have Italian heritage. So I don't think he was ever a fully made man, but he was as senior as you could imagine and highly trusted.
Edwards. Okay. All right. I'll save that discussion for another night. So
Gotti called Edwards his primo Iceman, I think. See if I've got that on the page. So Edwards was an extremely senior hitman for John Gotti. He would be called in if they had someone who needed killing, and they needed it to be done in a creative fashion, or somebody needed to be killed. And that's what the Zodiac killings were, right? It was to do with drugs and people who knew a little bit too much.
Zodiac killings. There's two couples and the cab driver.
Yeah, they were. I mean, you can go and read up on that, but the police knew it was related to drugs, and what it would have been is that someone was thinking of going to police and informing, and they just didn't trust someone completely, and so someone needed to be killed. I don't know why the taxi driver was killed. He must have known something that he shouldn't have known. He might have been used as a courier or something. We don't know the exact details of it.
I'll concede all that stuff right now. I'll argue that with you later. I want to stay on Margaret right now.
Yeah, let's talk more about Margaret. So Margaret saw Edwards. Well, she was forced to make this Zodiac Pines card, and he was also explaining. He started telling his whole life story and also explaining other Zodiac cards to him. Like there's this card, I've just scrolled to it now. It's called the Zodiac Halloween card, which was sent to Paul Avery. And he was explaining what the meaning of these cards were. And another thing he explained is the dripping pen card. And this turns out to be important because it's got this, see this bleeding knife of a Zodiac, that's actually a dog's tail. And if you turn that backwards, it's God, and Edwards thought he was God. And so we've got all these details. I don't expect you to take them all in. There's another thing he explained about the Zodiac. He'd left his name on a comic, which, if you know a lot about the Zodiac, the Red Mask was all involved. It was a Red Mask comic, and he left his name, I'm Ed, on the sleeve when he inked the comic book, and he showed this to Margaret, and Margaret could never have spotted all this by herself. So she knows all these details of the Zodiac cards and how that all sticks together. It's incredibly complicated. And then besides all that, he was confessing. He was telling her about all these murders he'd done.
Well, I got a question. The cards that you said he was sending. Let me speak later. The Zodiac cards. This is a two-part question. The Zodiac cards that he was sending out, and that doesn't sound like anything the mob does. And the second question is, why is he telling Margaret all this? So why
I already said about 3 times I don't know why Margaret was told all this.
All right, well, tell me why. Okay, all right, I won't ask you about Margaret anymore. But sending out cryptic cards like that's not work of the mob.
Not what anyone would guess. No, nobody ever guessed. Even John Cameron never guessed that this was the work of the mob, the Zodiac killer.
The mob has a signature when the mob kills
Cameron managed to figure out that Edwards was the Zodiac killer, but he never guessed this mafia connection at all.
The mafia has a signature they leave when they kill somebody. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, Edwards was being hired by the mafia, by the Gambino. Well, yeah, by the Gambinos to do all these murders that needed doing. I mean, people don't. And one thing is people think of the Gambinos as being in New York, but they weren't just in New York. It was all across the country. They were smuggling drugs.
So there's 5 families. There's 5 major families.
Yeah, and I think the Gambinos were about the most important of all of them. And of course, in 1971, John Gotti wasn't head of the Gambino crime family in those days. This was long before he became head. Although I think it was always known that he was going to become head. He was known as boss, and they just knew that he was, he was marked as he would be the head of the Gambinos eventually. When all the ones ahead of him had died, when who was the head then? Carlo Gambino. And Margaret met the number 2. I've forgotten his name as well. Oh God. But she met, and she met, who's it? Quack. The different people who were John's sort of close associates. I can't remember all their names offhand now. I'd have to get the Gambino crime family thing up to go through all that. But moving on, yeah. So Edwards, so leaving the Gambinos aside, which is a big part of the story, but Edwards told her about all sorts of murders he'd done. One of them was, which is very important, is Elizabeth Short. She was generally known as the Black Dahlia. This was an extremely famous murder in 1947. And Edwards had this, had been her girlfriend, and she'd borrowed money from him, which he couldn't pay back. And also she couldn't have sex with him. And he had this incredible hang up about Elizabeth Short. He murdered her very brutally and chopped her body in 2. And that's one of the murders he told Margaret about. He also told her about Stephanie Bryan. This was about Burton Abbott, the murder for which Burton Abbott was executed. So that's another key confession. I mean, he told her details about that checked out. She wasn't killed for parts of 3 days, and she said she was buried under a tumbleweed bush, and all sorts of details there. And we also know that Edwards led Edward Montgomery to the body, and he was using the name Leroy Myers. Myers was the name of his mother. He would use the name of his mother quite often. So although he was known as Edward Wayne Edwards, he was actually born Charles Edward Myers. There's a huge number of aliases Edwards used through his life, but there's sort of patterns in the aliases used. He told her all about the Zodiac killings, including how Paul E. Stein was murdered. And then this is where it gets even stranger. He at the end of 1971, Margaret was released. Basically, she was told, "Yeah, you can go now." It was when she had her baby. John Gotti actually came and visited her in hospital.
Did he really?
Yeah. So here's the events around about April. On April the 7th, Carol, that's Margot's sister, took her to her house as the baby was due, and she was born next day, April the 8th, in Sutton Memorial Hospital. I can actually say I've got things like the birth certificate or birth registration. And John actually came and visited her in hospital, and she was told, "Yeah, you can go and marry Darren." That's not quite his real name. I don't want to say his real name because Margaret's trying to keep all the details of her family secret, so the names are slightly changed. And then she later on she flew to Scotland, or she flew to the UK and went to Heathrow, and she was married. I've seen. Okay, May the 16th she was married. And then she went to Scotland, and they were living in Scotland after that. And then what's even stranger is that wasn't the end of it. Okay. So for some reason, Edwards would keep on coming back and visiting her again. This happened several times. And on one of these trips, it was sometime after, obviously, April 2003, he came and visited and told her all about how he'd murdered Lacey Peterson and framed Scott Peterson for it. So it's not just about the Zodiac killer, it's about other cases that she was told about.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing I said I was going to come back to was she's got PTSD, but she's also had brain cancer. And because of
brain
that,
cancer.
She got brain cancer around about, I think it was about, I've forgotten when exactly, 2000, but because of she's had pituitary tumors and radiation treatments, that knocked out that's given her what's called adrenal insufficiency, which means she can't make cortisol.
Can't make what?
And what happens is she's very worried if she starts feeling anxious or stressed in any way, then she can actually die from that because she can't make cortisol. So she has to, when she starts getting stressed, she has to avoid all kinds of stress. If she does start to get stressed, she has to take pills or an injection to bring her adrenaline level back down. And that's why she won't do any interviews and she won't talk to you. She won't talk to me. She won't talk to anyone because she can do it by sending messages on Facebook Messenger. But she's not going to be talking to anyone or giving any interviews or anything like that. So that was just the bit I wanted to explain. Okay, I think I've explained quite a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. So let's have some questions now from you.
Okay, so Margaret meets up with his home, and John Gotti takes her up under his wing, and then he hooks her up or whatever with Edwards to be a cover girl. Is that right?
Yeah, Margaret was a cover girl for John. So they would go out, say they would go to Tracy Airport. Then Margaret would go along with them. And the idea was to make it a little bit less obvious that they were a group of criminals, you know.
Right. So
that's what my understanding of cover girl is. It's to make it look like, you know, it's just a group of people with a few girls hanging around.
What would you say? Would you say 5 men and 2 girls, or?
Oh, I don't know exactly who went on what trips. She at the end of this, I mean, one's interesting bit. She does remember being taken to Tracy Airport, and she was shown a very fancy airplane there. And also, Edwards said he could actually fly a plane. So where do I talk about the airport?
The only thing I'm asking about the cover girl is, I mean, if I'm looking at a group and there's 7 people and 7 of them are men, and then I see a group of 5 men and 2 women.
I don't think there would typically have been 7 of them, but there might have been. There might be 3 or 4 of them, and Margaret.
Let's break it down to if I see a group and there's 3 men and a woman, it'll look a little bit more stranger to me than saying 4 men. I mean, that's just me, but that's neither here nor there. So
yeah, I mean, it might have just been John Gotti, a driver, and Margaret, or just John Gotti and Margaret.
That would make a lot more sense to me. John Gotti and driver Margaret. Well, I mean, this must have been some more of a looker for John Gotti to find her out in California and make that his cover girl. I mean, because this man could pretty much get what he wanted.
He could.
So he was running, not running that time, but he's this big in the crime family, and he's spending his time out in some small town in California you never heard of to find this girl.
This time.
Huh?
John Gotti was nominally in federal prison at this time.
In the 1970s, I don't think he was a federal president in the 70s.
Yeah, he was meant to be still be finishing a 2-year federal sentence in federal prison, but he was let out, and this is all part of the backstory that the FBI were using people like Edwards and John Gotti and the Gambinos. They had these understandings. They were sort of working together. I mean, it's not that big a secret that, for instance, Nixon had all these connections to organized crime.
Nixon had connection to organized crime?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he was using, because it was all to do with the unions and the union vote.
But wait a second. Whoa, hold up there, buddy. The unions voted Democrat. Nixon was Republican.
Yeah, but he was working with the unions to try and get their vote. It was all very political, and we don't know who was giving the orders. I think Carlo Gambino was mostly giving the orders, and the FBI were doing what he said, because J. Edgar Hoover was compromised. They had the Gambinos had information on J. Edgar Hoover that he was compromised. And
let me tell you something. I've heard people make that argument before.
And
J. Edgar Hoover was the most powerful man in the world. I don't buy that for a minute.
Carlos Gambino was the most powerful man.
No, J. Edgar Hoover was the most powerful man. He would have taken down Carlos.
No. J. Edgar Hoover was not the most powerful man. I
beg to differ on that.
Carlos Gambino was the boss. J. Edgar Hoover did what Gambino said, and Nixon did what Nixon was under them all.
I don't believe that.
Well, we don't know the entire relationship, but they had understandings. If you look at this, how easily John Gotti got off with murder, and the sort of plea deals he was getting, they were working together to some extent. I mean, if J. Edgar Hoover had stepped out of line, then his secrets would have been revealed.
You're talking about his secret with Clyde Tolson?
Yeah, he was a homosexual.
Well, I had a friend's mother. He's in his 70s now. His mother worked in D.C. at that time. She said it was pretty common knowledge.
Of course, it was pretty common knowledge, but
what's he worried secret about?
The Gambinos would have had photographs and all that sort of stuff. Probably. I'm sure they had blackmail material on Hoover.
I think Hoover was a smart enough man. He would never let that have happened. But
he was compromised. He was.
I don't believe that for a minute. Anyway, you still with me, George?
It's the Gambinos. They were far more powerful than the FBI in those days. I mean, at one point, Hoover actually denied that organized crime even existed, and then he had to, obviously. I mean, if state, what you have to understand is, even Hoover had limited powers. So if a Gambino was caught murdering someone at state level, then he couldn't necessarily protect them from prosecution.
No.
But there would be plea deals arranged. There would be shadowy backroom deals. I mean, you explain to me how John Gotti got away with murder and ended up serving 2 years for it.
Well, hold on a second. I'm trying to remember the exact time frame that this happened. That John Gotti went to prison for murder for 2 years.
Right. You can look that sort of stuff up.
So I know in the 90s he ended up going to prison for life.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, of course, that was after J. Edgar Hoover had died, and the power situation did change eventually.
Yeah, because his son actually took over then.
I mean, hold on, let me just get up some facts about John Gotti was in
John
prison.
Gotti was attempted. John Gotti never went to prison.
Gotti was in prison 3 times, I think.
He never went. He went to prison. He never. Last time he went to prison for murder was in 1972. He had attempted manslaughter in 75, and hijacking in 68. He did 3 years imprisonment, and then 4 years, and then served 2 years.
I mean, he got an incredible plea deal for when he murdered, or when he was part of the group that did a murder. It was a revenge murder, wasn't it? Just trying to remember. Oh God, I haven't got all these details in my mind because I've got.
Okay, right here.
But he got an incredible plea deal. Hold on, let me look at plea deal. Yeah, he originally pleaded guilty. Yeah, it was hijackings that he was in prison in around 1970. And then, yeah, it was the murder of James McBratney, which was a hit. He was part of the hit team, along with Ruggiero. Angelo Ruggiero is one of the mobsters that Margaret met. He was always there. Okay, yeah, they murdered James McBratney. And he was identified, there were eyewitnesses and everything. And with the help of Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn was all part of it, he got 4 years for so-called attempted manslaughter. It was a murder. It wasn't attempted manslaughter. How the hell did they fiddle that? Okay, so, and Roy Cohn was? Roy Cohn was the lawyer who was all involved with McCarthyism and all that other stuff we already talked about, the Red Scare. There was this whole group of senior kind of Republicans like Nixon, J. Edgar Hoover, Marcus Cohn.
Well, Hoover was Hoover. I really can't classify as a Democrat or Republican as being head of the FBI. I mean, he took office in 1924, I believe. So I really wouldn't say
he was head of the FBI for far too long. I mean, I think he had.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that.
Presidents, didn't he? He had a whole secret file. God knows what he had on everyone, but he was very feared by all the presidents, I think, and all the politicians because he had all the dirt on them.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. He was. So, Gotti hijacking a plane, and
I mean, that's how John Gotti managed to only get served 2 years for murder. If you can't tell me there isn't some funny business going on there. Of course, later on, after J. Edgar Hoover died, eventually John Gotti ran out of luck, and he got done for murder because I've forgotten who it was informed on him, didn't he? That they all started not keeping quiet. Gravano, so they all pretty much went to prison because Gravano testified against them. And
he struck a playboy with Roy Cohn, yes.
But we're mostly talking about an earlier time period in the 1970s.
Okay. I'm sorry, we got off track there. So I was back there with Margaret. So John Gotti comes and picks her out. I mean, but you don't know why he just chose Margaret.
I think we don't really know. I think Edwards chose Margaret,
but
because I think Edwards drugged her. I think we don't really know, but there's all sorts of strange reasons why Edwards might have targeted her that I don't really want to try and explain.
I'm talking about Gotti though, because first Gotti came. They put her in there because she was pregnant. Then Gotti's the one that came and got her out.
Well, the madam told Gotti that she didn't want him, and she should be a cover girl instead, or something else. She was a keeper. That's the language that was used.
How did the madam know Gotti that well?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know who the madam was. We don't know where the Victorian building was. We don't know. There's so much we don't know. You know, we don't know. We
Much
don't know
more.
everything. And yeah,
So
well, yeah,
during
I'd love to know who the madam was, but we've got no idea who she was.
so during the time that Gotti was he was the underboss of Sammy the Bull, and when he was in prison in the 70s and 60s, where was Margaret at then?
Well, Margaret was basically terrorized from about January to April 1971, and then she was basically released, and she was allowed to go off and marry her husband. She had the baby, she got married, she went off to Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
and that was sort of, originally I understood that was the end of it, but it wasn't quite. Edwards would come back and visit her occasionally, probably at night, we think. But again, when he would come back and visit her again, somehow he either hypnotized her or she was asleep, or he she wasn't fully conscious when he was telling her all these things.
Okay, one question, George. He went to Scotland to visit her.
Sorry, Edwards went to visit her.
Right, but you said that she got married and moved back to Scotland. So Edwards went to Scotland to visit her.
She wasn't in Scotland very long. She does actually think Edwards did visit her in Scotland once.
And when he
She
visited,
remembers the terrifying incident when someone tried to basically break into a house and didn't succeed. In fact, her daughter even remembers that incident. But but she wasn't in Scotland for very long.
I just want to follow up on something else you said.
She was in Scotland for I don't know exactly how long. I think 2 or 3 years, something like that, and then she moved back to America because
and Edwards came and visited her over the years.
Yeah, he would somehow track her down, find out where she was, and come and visit her again.
And then he would hypnotize her and tell her things he had done.
Yeah, I want to be a bit careful about saying he would hypnotize her because she thinks it was more he would come like when she was asleep. So she sometimes calls it sleep training. So I think he would come like in the middle of the night when she was asleep, and she doesn't know. But she would wake up the point is she would wake up in the morning and she wouldn't know that he'd been. So yeah, I think he sort of hypnotized her or something happened.
Where was her husband?
Sorry?
Where was her husband?
Oh, she divorced. Her marriage didn't last very long. So she moved to Scotland, okay. She had the baby. She got married to Darren. She moved to Scotland. And then I think Darren was playing around, he wasn't a very good husband, and the marriage didn't last. I'm not sure exactly how long it lasted, but you can see I've just showed that when by the time Margaret was age 22 in 1974, she was back in America. So
where was she living at then?
That was in Las Vegas. That photo was taken. Sorry?
Where was she living at then?
I'm not sure exactly where she was living. But that photo, I think, was taken around about probably the time they were getting divorced. I don't know. I don't know all these personal details because they're not very relevant.
Edwards would sneak into her house and whatever he did. Where was her kid at?
Well, a lot of the times he was coming back. I mean, he was coming back to visit her right up through the 2000s. So he came back around about 2003, 2004, and by that time her children were, grown up, left home.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was just single.
How big a time period was there from the time that he's seen her last till he started back visiting her?
So how long between?
Yeah, like when was you said Edward started back visiting her. When did she see him last, and then when did he start back visiting her?
Well, she saw him last in like April 1971. Then she thinks someone tried to break into her home in Scotland, so that was an attempted visit, but it wasn't successful. And then I don't know how many times he visited her after that, but certainly around 2003, 2004, because he told her about Lacey Peterson. And then again, she knows he came back. Hold on. She knows also he visited around about 2009 because she had these books turning up that she didn't know where they'd come from.
I just want to show. So he hadn't seen her. Last time he seen her was 71, and then he came back. Well, breaking in Scotland failed. He flew all the way to Scotland to see her and couldn't break in. But then next time was around 2003 and 2004, and he went to see her.
I'm not saying that was the next time. I think he visited her other times as well. I don't know I don't know the total number of times he visited her because she doesn't really know. I mean, he would visit her, and he would visit her, and she wouldn't know he'd come and visited her.
But I thought you said after the hypnosis, she started remembering all these things.
She didn't start remembering him until 2015.
Then she remembers those visits then after she started remembering, right?
Yeah, but she still doesn't. She remembers what Edwards told her, so she remembers the sessions she had with him. Okay, like she would be asleep one night, he would come into the room, he would be showing her things, he would be telling her things. She would wake up in the morning, she didn't know anything had happened. Okay, and that happened. Okay. That happened again and again. Yeah, she had this conscious memory of someone trying to break into her home when she was in Scotland.
I'm just trying to get just a basic timeline here about, it doesn't have to be the exact.
Unfortunately, the timeline is really hard to tie down. There's a few things she does know. She knows that a book appeared around about 2009 because Edwards left her a book, or she left her several books. In fact, some of them she threw out because she didn't know where these books had come from.
2003, okay. But she knows from 71 to
she knows 2003, 2004 because of sort of the context of what this was when Edwards was telling her about Lacey Peterson, and she sort of remembers it was around about that time because it was all to do with the Martha Stewart case. Do you remember Martha Stewart?
Yes, I remember when that happened.
She got convicted of some kind of financial crime, I think.
What she did was she sold, it's called insider trading. She made it.
Yeah, insider trading.
But was it? But just one question though. But does she remember any visits between 1971 and 1994?
I would have to ask, not consciously.
Now,
I don't know. I don't know if she knows.
Okay.
She doesn't know how many times he visited. What she's able to do is work backwards. I mean, obviously, in order to tell her about the Lacey Peterson case, it obviously follows that he must have visited her after that murder happened. Okay. And
now,
he also told her about the Teresa Halbach case, incidentally, which was in 2005. So he must have visited her after 2005 as well.
Why did he tell her all this?
Why, we don't know. She was to be a time capsule, and that was. I mean, I think. Okay, I can start explaining that. Edwards's personality was. He wanted to prove that he was the greatest criminal ever. Okay. And what he wrote in his autobiography in 1972, I would plan every crime patiently, deliberately, and cold-bloodedly. The world must be made to realize how smart I was. Now, what he was, is he was an egotist. He was a psychopath. He wanted to demonstrate that he was the world's master criminal, if you like.
Oh, so I think
he wanted everyone to know his story one day. But
that's true. I agree with that. A lot of serial killers want to event something in them wants to get caught, and they want the claim.
But he didn't want to be caught, and even when he was arrested in 2009, he still didn't tell everything he knew. He just told enough murders to get the death penalty.
What was the name of his book?
Metamorphosis of a Criminal. I mean, that's a really interesting book because when you read it, it's a mixture of fact and lies.
You read it?
Oh, I've got. Oh, you can go online and read it. Yeah, I mean, if you click on that link, you can get to it. It's all online.
And he wanted people to know that he was the greatest criminal. That he would actually plan out how he was going to kill people.
Yeah, I mean, one thing he said.
How did he plan out having burglars waiting outside Lacey Peterson's house and him breaking in? How did he plan out getting John Benet Ramsey downstairs and feeding her pineapple? And
he would stalk people for months. We don't know anything about how he did it.
This is 15 and 20 years later. He had already planned out that he was going to murder somebody like that.
Oh no, I mean, he hadn't planned Lacey Peterson. What do you mean? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long he was planning Lacey Peterson's abduction and murder. Probably a few months, I guess. I don't know. We don't know exactly. I don't think. He would have these plans, and we can't tell exactly when he decided there was going to be the burglary and when he decided that he was going to be abducted. We don't know every detail, but he would be planning things.
Was there a sexual relationship between him and Margaret?
Edwards? No.
What about her and Gotti?
Between her and Gotti, yes. I mean, I think it's the sort of question I don't really ask her.
Question.
I mean, she was sexually abused. She was raped. They even made a video of it. Like an X-rated movie. There were.
When was the last time she saw Gotti?
Sorry?
When was the last time she seen Gotti? I mean, when did he stop having contact with her?
As far as I know, the last time she would have seen John Gotti was when he came to the hospital just after she gave birth in April 1971. I don't think she ever saw Gotti again, as far as I know. That might not be quite. I think that's the case. That might not be accurate, but it was. As far as I know, it was Edwards.
About the same time that she quit seeing Edwards too, right? Around 71, 72.
Yeah, I mean, there were big breaks. I mean, he would come back years later and revisit her. I don't think she knows.
Now, when he came back and revisited her, she still didn't know that until she called that guy or something, and
exactly until she called John Cameron in 2015. It was all in her subconscious. It was all
what made her call him again?
Let's go back. It was all to do with Edward Montgomery and the Burton Abbott case. It was all to do with that, because she was not hypnotized. She was not hypnotized when she met Edward S. Montgomery. So she knew about these rumors that there was 3 cases, actually. It was Burton Abbott. It was there's so many things to remember. That's the trouble. If I look at Abbott, it was 3 cases. It was Carol Chessman, Barbara Graham, and Burton Abbott. I don't even know they were all innocent. But anyway, Burton Abbott, I'm quite sure, was innocent. And it was 3 cases, and Edward S. Montgomery was all involved in these. And I mean, I don't know why they took her to see Edward S. Montgomery, but I think maybe it was a test. They were trying to see, would she say, help, I've been taken hostage by the Gambino crime family or something. I don't know. I think it was maybe a bit of a test like that. We don't really know. But he told her about these cases, which is, another strange thing.
What exactly got... what was it when she called James Cameron? What made everything click that all of a sudden she knew these details?
I mean, what happened? She contacted John Cameron just because she knew John Cameron had written his book, and he was saying Burton Abbott was innocent, a victim of Edward Wayne Edwards, and she contacted him, and she started telling him, presumably a little bit of her story about how she'd met Edward Montgomery and how she'd been held captive by a group of criminals. I don't think even by 2015, she still didn't know they were the Gambinos. She knew, she had all these memories of them, but I don't think she figured out they were the Gambinos even up to that point.
What year did she figure all of that out?
then John Cameron was asking her, well, do you remember anything about Edwards? And she said no, and then she's thought, what about that, and then she started, well, the first thing she remembered was this black doctor's bag he had, and then she started remembering more and more and more. It sort of just led her.
What year was this?
2015.
Well, she called him in 2015, but what after you said she questioned for a while? What year did she actually start remembering it? Started coming back.
2015. Everything about Edwards.
So.
And she didn't remember it all at once either. She's still remembering more now. I mean, she'll write me a new text message to say I've remembered a bit more.
All right. So let me. I know this is kind of be hard to kind of time ballpark it, but when did she remember enough to know, like, oh God, I was connected with the Gambinos, I was connected with Edwards? How long did that take?
I don't know exactly. I think fairly rapidly, because she had all these memories of John Gotti, and Edwards told her. I mean, she also had a lot of memories about Edwards. She remembers like his tattoos and things, but John Gotti told her a lot about himself. He told her about his wife. Oh God, what's her name? John Gotti's wife, Victoria. So she was told all about Victoria. I think he showed her photos of them and
Tell her about his wife.
Yeah, John Gotti shared a lot of enough about he would never made it clear what his name was, but she's got plenty of memories about I mean, she was very intimate with John for this whole period of time.
And Edward Wayne Edwards was a serial killer hitman for John Gotti.
Exactly, but not just for John Gotti. He was a hitman for the FBI.
Okay, let's save that when we get into that story. Okay, so all right, so here's my predicament now. So last time Edwards and Gotti seen her was around 71 or 72. That be correct?
Yeah, 71. I think.
So then in 2015, she calls John Cameron, correct?
That's right.
She starts having all these memories. And
that's the first time. I mean, she did start writing a book. She did start writing a book about her experience with the Gambino.
Okay. Well, I mean,
it took a long time to write that book.
Everybody is Edwards, Gotti, they're all dead. Why don't she cash in? Who's gonna kill her?
She doesn't. She's not. I don't think she's interested in that. I mean, it's an incredible story.
You got that kind of story, and you could cash in. Nobody's gonna touch you. You're untouchable at that point.
I don't know. I mean, she wants to be a witness. She's a very decent person. She's a very intelligent person.
How you gonna be a witness when everybody's dead?
She doesn't want to taint what she knows. She wants to testify in court, and she wants that to be the end of it. She doesn't want to write a book.
Okay. Well, who is she gonna fight against? They're all dead.
The Gambinos are not all dead. There is still a Gambino crime family.
But the people that she was involved in.
The husband of Darlie Routier is not dead.
Well, I mean, I don't know what connection she has with him. That hasn't been mentioned, but
well, that was another murder that Edwards was behind. He didn't actually murder Darlie Routier's children, but Darren Routier did, and Edwards set it up, I believe.
So let me tell you what
Edwards talked about that. Edwards talked about that murder, not a great deal, but he talked about it.
They get that guy to go on trial. Prosecution calls her as their star witness. And they get up there. They talk to her, and she gives a story. And I'm the defense attorney, and I stand up and I say, You really are going to insult the intelligence of this jury right here. Tell us that you didn't believe anything or remember anything for 44 years, and suddenly you remember all these details right here about my client, and you didn't say anything until then, and now you don't remember any of it, but now all of it's coming back to you fresh. You really expect us to believe that? And what do you think that jury is going to do?
Well, it's an interesting question because, I mean, the hypnosis makes all this absolutely amazing. I mean, the fact is, yeah, although she had all these memories, they were blocked off. I mean, she's scared about what she knows. There's no doubt about that. I mean, she doesn't want to testify in court, but she thinks it's her duty not to prosecute people because, like you said, most of them are, well, Darren Routier isn't, but and you know what she knows about the Darlie Routier case isn't actually that significant.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what Edwards told her in that case. I think that's the only memory she's got of it, is that Edwards told her that the sock dropped out of a chopper, and that's all she's got on the Darlie Routier case, and she's very reluctant to get involved in that case.
File a civil suit against John Gotti's estate.
Edwards actually confessed to another woman about Darlie Routier. He said he'd killed her.
But she can testify, file a suit against John Gotti's estate for emotional damages.
She can't file any lawsuits. She's not a rich person.
She doesn't have to. You don't have to have a lawsuit. You don't have to have money to file a lawsuit. Lawyers work based off trial attorneys based off what you win in the settlement. You file a civil suit.
Who is she going to sue?
His estate.
What do you mean the state? She can't.
John Gotti's estate.
Oh, John Gotti's estate.
Yeah.
Well, John Gotti didn't do
what?
Well, John Gotti actually protected her, so I don't know.
You just.
I don't think she's going to be suing John Gotti's estate. No.
Well, why not? You said she wanted to testify. There's her chance to testify.
No, she wants to testify for all the people who've been wrongly convicted, like Scott Peterson.
Now, that's not what you just told me.
That's what she wants to testify about. She wants.
No, you just said she was scared.
She doesn't. No, hold on. I'm going to rephrase that. She does not want to testify, but she is saying, "This is what I know," and if say Scott Peterson wants to call her as a witness, and she knows not just that Edwards confessed to her, he told her an incredible amount of detail in that case. And she is willing to testify to what Edwards told her, that she's managed to remember, okay, in order that Scott Peterson can be exonerated. Now, maybe Scott Peterson can be exonerated without her testimony, because there's plenty of evidence that he's innocent without her testimony. I think it's my personal view that if she testified to a jury that she's got these memories of Edwards showing her these photos of Edwards explaining how the burglary was done, Edwards explaining how he planted the bodies on the shore of San Francisco Bay, and there's all sorts of extra corroboration that comes into it. I think that's definitely a legal possibility if Scott Peterson gets a retrial. Now, I'm not saying Scott Peterson's lawyers are going to call her as a witness.
I can tell you they're not going to call her as a witness, because that jury would horse laugh her out of there with that kind of story.
I don't think they would, because it's so strongly corroborated. You don't probably.
Somebody comes to me and they tell me these people got hypnotized, and 34 years later, suddenly they remember all these details. Then I'm gonna
just by itself, I agree, but you don't understand the corroboration properly. I mean, it's not just, it's how she knows all these details of how the crime was carried out, and I believe it will all be corroborated by other witnesses. Like there's all sorts of information that corroborates it. There was an investigation that that was done. I mean, we're now moving on to the Lacey Peterson case, but I'm moving on to that screen. But there was an investigation done by someone called Chris Howard, who discovered that the body was being kept in the tomb on the Albany Bulb, for instance, and Edwards told Margaret the name of one of the accomplices who was in the boat when Lacey Peterson's body was dumped, and his name was Jean Paul. And Chris Howard found out the same thing. He found out that he actually talked to Jean Paul. So it's not one thing. You've got to understand, it's not one thing. It's an amazing amount of corroboration, and not only that, but hold on, stop. I really am going to get cross with you. Edwards didn't just.
You can cross all you want. I mean,
shut up.
First of all, you're not going to tell me to shut up. No, you're not going to tell me to shut up. Okay. That's one thing you're not.
I'm stopping this call. Bye.
Stop the call.